So let me know one more time what I'm supposed to go through.
Oh yeah, you're going to say the the outcome of the Proposition N election, and what do you think? Um, how it will affect the people who are directly affected, and what do you think the next steps are?
For like 10 minutes.
As long as you can, and you can
Okay.
stop and start.
Right
Go.
on. So my name is Jason Negron Gonzalez. I work at People Organized to Win Employment Rights or Powers, an organization of low and no wage workers fighting for justice. And we've been organizing and trying to deal with issues around welfare and workfare for a little bit of time now. Basically, with this campaign, the No on End campaign, we had a lot of success, but when it came to November 5th, the vote turned out to be 59% of people in San Francisco in favor and 41% against. And in my eyes, what that represents is the large amount of money and propaganda that was put into trying to get the thing passed. So, when all was said and done, more than $1 million was spent to pass Proposition N. And the campaign that was run in a lot of ways relied on disinformation, so trying to confuse people or demonize or attack homeless people for being poor, trying to confuse voters into thinking that that these are just a bunch of people that are choosing to live outside, right? Not talking at all about the housing crisis, not talking at all about living wage jobs, not talking at all about health care or any other type of services that people need. Um, and in a lot of ways, their campaign was successful in putting enough ads on TV, enough billboards up, and controlling the media enough to be able to, get their message out and silence folks that were opposed to them. So for us, uh, we were able to run a grassroots campaign against this proposition. Uh, we were able to, basically beat it back when a lot of people said we had no chance at all. So I think in a lot of ways it was a successful campaign that was run against, even though we lost this battle. Um, I think there's a lot of things to look at with the campaign. I think the way that the media worked in particular was reprehensible. The Newsom campaign and Gavin Newsom himself got basically free press as much as they wanted. It was treated as sort of the white upper class media darling, as opposed to the rundown sort of nasty homeless people. And that sort of continued throughout all the media coverage. We were largely shut out even when we were talking about Proposition N as a piece of policy, much less in some of the underlying issues. Um, so I think that's all stuff that needs to be examined for us as people who are trying to organize for justice. What role is the media taking in terms of blocking out the voices of people who are oppressed and are struggling to try to get justice? And what role does it take in terms of upholding Gavin Newsom in the positions of some of these other folks? All right, put this on pause. I wasn't looking at you. Hey, you're a fool, man. Why you always come back when I'm doing something crazy? Right on. So I think all of those issues are things that we have to examine when looking back at the election. For us, it worked to go out and organize and talk to people who were being affected by the legislation, by the proposition. It worked for us to go out and get the word out in the community. But the media was definitely an obstacle to what we were trying to do. And the question of them having money to get advertisements on TV and to basically buy their message into everybody's living room or apartment, I think, was very much a factor in what the outcome was. So we're trying to take all those lessons and move forward. Overall, this is going to be, this can be, depending on how strongly we're able to fight against it, a beginning, the beginning of a further slip in terms of attacking homeless people as part of the social policy in San Francisco. So this proposal, again, for folks who are less familiar with it, will cut assistance for homeless people who are receiving general assistance down to $59 a month and give the rest out in the form of some sort of voucher service where people will basically be forced into the shelters for the most part, as opposed to being able to stay in the shelters for free in the past. Um, Punitive social policy to deal with homelessness doesn't work. Homelessness is fundamentally an issue of housing and of poverty. So, and if we try to deal with the issue by attacking homeless people, either with the police or by cutting services, it doesn't really get us anywhere in terms of dealing with the issues. but it does cause a lot more misery and suffering for a certain section of the city's population. It's going to be up to all of us to be able to continue fighting against that type of policy, because now that they've gotten their foot in the door effectively with getting this thing passed, they're definitely going to be trying to shove the door open and get more stuff in there. So whether it's about criminalizing panhandling, whether it's about criminalizing sleeping outside, or whether it's about other types of cuts of services, it's all going to be stuff that we have to be on the lookout for. What it seems like is going to happen, and it seems like the direction that things are moving with Proposition N, is that more and more they're trying to lump the services that exist together or exclude people entirely from all of the services. So with Prop N passing, the likely outcome is going to be that they're taking people who are getting cash assistance and forcing them to be in the shelter system. Uh, and the room to be on cash assistance outside of the shelter system, because you don't like the shelter system, you don't feel safe there, or you know that you literally aren't safe there. The space for that to be a choice that you can make has become less. So increasingly, it seems like they're going to have people funneled into multiple services that then, have a lot of requirements, have you jumping over hurdles left and right, and giving you all kinds of opportunities to get cut, or you're outside, no cash assistance, no shelter, and then that becomes more and more of an illegal position and more of a space that they're trying to push out. Um, so I think for us, we're reaching a point where we have to make a decision as a city and as progressive people in a supposedly enlightened city about how we're going to deal with these problems. And if this is the path that we end up going down, I think it's going to be causing a lot of trouble, and it's not going to necessarily solve the problems that we're trying to deal with. So those are all things I think people are going to have to look out for. And basically, in this period of time, in terms of the follow-up for Proposition N, people are sort of looking at two different things. One is what I mentioned earlier, is that there's going to be other stuff coming. This isn't the first proposal. It wasn't the first proposal, and it won't be the last. So whether it's about Newsom trying to position himself for mayor by bringing other proposals, or whether it's just about right-wing people trying to pursue this kind of social policy, there's going to be other stuff coming up that everyone's going to have to keep a lookout for. So they're trying to centralize access to the shelter systems to make it more difficult to get into the shelter system. They're trying to prohibit panhandling. They're trying to do all these types of things. So in the months that are coming, we're all going to have to keep an eye out for these types of things coming up and try to get involved with organizing and activism against them. Specifically with relationship to Proposition N, now it's gone from being passed at the ballot to the Department of Human Services and the Human Service Commission of San Francisco, which are going to figure out how to implement it. And I think in that process as well, there's going to be, a lot of the gray area, because the proposal, when it comes down to it, is not well written out. The policy is not well described within what got passed at the ballot. So the department's going to have a lot of flexibility in terms of how it sets it up. So for us, in terms of trying to minimize the negative impact, we're going to need to be pushing for permanent jobs, for as affordable housing, and all of those types of things to be the outcomes that are coming out of people getting their checks cut, so that it's not just a matter of people being forced into shelter as the sort of easiest path that the department wants to take. Um, so all of those things are going to be sort of what's coming up next. And thank you very much.
Or what have you heard about there being a lawsuit in about Proposition N?
So the other piece with Proposition N is that it seems that there is very likely going to be a legal challenge to it that should materialize shortly. And different progressive lawyers have basically taken a position and found some case law that basically says that the process. Let me start over.
Go ahead.
So basically, so coming up soon, it seems like there's going to be a legal challenge to Proposition N. And a group of progressive lawyers have gotten together to try to basically craft a legal challenge to the proposal, to try to again minimize its impact and try to deal with the fact that it was fraudulently put out to voters, and that it's going to have a negative impact for people who are homeless, and it's going to increase homelessness. That is going to materialize probably in the next couple of weeks, and I think they're still in the process of trying to craft their strategy with it. So if it is successful, then we may be back, to fighting this proposal again in some other space, whether if it's at the ballot again or if it's in front of the supervisors or wherever it is. So the legal challenge may provide some space to try to keep fighting our proposition and to stop the implementation, but it's not clear, and we're going to have to see how that plays out.
Is there any way that middle class people could get involved with trying to bring about a meaningful change in the way that Proposition N will affect people?
No, I think definitely. I think all people in San Francisco should try to get involved with the work that's going on against Prop N. The Committee Against Increased Homelessness has been the main sort of space that's been trying to fight against Prop N. First when it was in front of the supervisors and then when it went to the ballot. And the contact number for the Committee Against Increased Homelessness is area code 415-346-4808. And folks can call that number to try to get more information on what's continuing to go on with the fight. Yeah, all types of people that are not involved in political work, middle class people who want to be allies, low income people who are watching this broadcast. Everybody should get involved because it's a fight about the future of all of our city. We're going to have to work together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know I did it once when I was organizing for home care workers. Yeah, and me being an outsider, they weren't trusting me at all. They were told stories about unions, just want their money.
Yeah, because they always tell them, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not involved in that.
No.
Yeah.
When I had to explain, I said,
So we have the desk over there?
The introduction of US food. And lastly, I think how are the people reacting to this situation? I mean, what sort of alternatives are out there in addressing the situation? I think here in the United States, we begin to hear a lot about some doubts about going into war. And I think it has a lot to do with the economy is not in a very good shape. Many are losing their jobs. And then and then we hear scandals like Enron. I mean, really bad, really horrible scandals. Enron, WorldCom, big corporations collapsing and leaving hundreds of thousands of Americans without jobs, and even their lifetime savings just disappearing. And suddenly, in the midst of all this, and of course, we know about the fact that George Bush had the circumstances of his coming to office being very shady. In fact, he not really having the popular vote, and yet still being able to clinch the presidency. Then there's this movement toward why all of a sudden there's a need to declare a war or launch a full-scale invasion of Iran. Seems to me that all of these moves are ways to divert from real problems that Americans are facing. The quality of life is deteriorating, education, health, and social services are wanting, and yet we're being diverted to march with drumbeat of war. If war by itself will address the issues that people face in their community. Here among Filipinos, we know that along Market Street, we find many Filipinos who are World War II veterans. It's already been 56 years, and they're still waiting for their benefits. Yeah. And you have to ask, maybe the United States government should prioritize those that have actually gone through a war and served the country. Give them what's due them before they all pass away, before starting up some new war somewhere else. you know, um, there's going to be talk of conscripting young Americans. There's going to be a lot of young Filipinos in the mix. For what? For a war? And is it really a war that's necessary? Maybe the war that we need to be fighting is a war to overcome poverty, or to overcome the kind of divisions that breed hate and enmity among nations. So you know you see that there's a lot of questions that need to be asked, and I think. But before we get into that, we should also be probably asking what is also happening in our homeland, and how is it connected to what we're immediately facing here in the United States. 2 years ago, a remarkable uprising of the people took place. You know, I think back in '86, people were saying, it's just a fluke, you know, Filipino people rose up, threw out the dictator. But for the second time, they repeated it. They ousted a corrupt president. Now this was really an amazing display of democracy. And having ousted this corrupt president, there was really a sense of euphoria and hope that perhaps things would change for the better for the Filipino people. After all, they've been wallowing in, worsening poverty. And proof of that is so many Filipinos leave for greener pastures in the United States and other countries. And there was really hope that some changes would take place, that would really get to the heart of the problems that Filipinos face. Problems of backwardness, problems of foreign dominance, of corrupt government. But what has happened ever since is that it seems that the people who were behind this incredible display of democracy, this exercise of democracy, are the ones being victimized or demonized. Many activists are, kind of know the irony. It seems like those who were responsible for people power are now the ones being subject to all sorts of hardship, suffering, oppression by the government that benefited the most from this exercise of people power. And I think that what we see today is that there is a rise in violations of human rights, brutal assassinations of leaders, grassroots organizations, brutal killings of electoral ward leaders of Bayan Muna. I think in the last 2 years, there's been about 27 electoral ward leaders who've been killed. Disappearances, things that were associated with Marcos, the Marcos dictatorship, are recurring, not only recurring, but getting worse. And you have to ask yourself, why is this all happening? And then,
They call it salvaging.
And villages and communities are uprooted by military intervention. So there's a lot of concern. First of all, there's poverty. This poverty in the last 30 years has bred a lot of rebellion, a lot of resistance to those that have been perpetuating the poverty. So you've had not only the rise of organizations of street farmers, professionals, church people, resisting dictatorship, fighting for their human rights and advancement of their people. But you've also had people who have been driven by these conditions to go out and take up arms and kill. Well, in the last 12, 10 years, because of the rise of a revolutionary movement in the Philippines, the new peoples are, you hear about the rebels, and you also hear about the Moros taking up arms because of their condition. You've had a peace process. And this peace process has made some progress. Not only because it brought cast light on the reasons for the rebellion, which are poverty, foreign domination, corrupt government, but also because the people's organizations themselves have been pushing it. Those that were behind People Power 1 and 2, organizations like Bayan, Kilusang Mayon, the workers, the peasants, and all the other different organizations of the middle class have been pushing for addressing the roots of insurgency. And because of it, you've had things, you've had negotiations take place between like the rebels and the government. And out of 10 years of negotiation, something like the Comprehensive Agreement for the Respect of Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law was forged between the two parties. Now, it's a landmark agreement. It would have been a mechanism for humanizing, this conflict that's happening in the Philippines. But unfortunately, what we find, to the frustration of the people's organizations, is that it is the government that is unwilling to implement. They've signed it. It was signed by Estrada and Shell, and then reaffirmed by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. And interestingly enough, she has also refused to implement it and to move forward on previous agreements that have already been forged between the rebels and the government. Now, anyone who would look at the fine print knows that it's a very good piece of paper. But there seems to be an unwillingness to implement it. Why is that? It seems like many of the human rights, if you were on the assuming the moral high ground, you'd think that if the rebels are such terrorists, they wouldn't want to be monitored on human rights. But what human rights organizations themselves attest to is that the human rights violations against the people are being committed by the military and the government itself. And this would perhaps best explain why there is no interest in really pursuing the implementation of something like the Human Rights Agreement. Now, ever since September 11, you found Bush unleashing this, we're going to have to declare a war on terrorism, and manipulating the grief of the American people to sort of unleash all these draconian measures. Well, and it seems like people are made to accept something like this. All of these measures are necessary. It's necessary for you to give up certain individual liberties so we can have security and peace of mind. When I was much, much younger, in my early teens, I remember turning on the TV and listening to Marcos and why he needed to declare martial. Oh, you need to give up your liberties so we can build a new society, so we can have prosperity. And the middle class at that time bought. But notice how similar the reasoning is. There was a fellow back in the 30s who said exactly the same thing.
Mussolini.
Hitler and Mussolini.
Mussolini,
They
yeah.
both said the same thing. They told their people, you know, you're wallowing in poverty. I'll tell you what, we will rise above this poverty, but you need to give up something and go to war. Well, all of this that we're hearing right now from the U.S. government and from the Arroyo government are no different. We're being made to accept the inevitability of war, of people killing fellow human beings, you know, so that we can have and enjoy or maintain the quality of life that we have. Actually, it's not a quality of life we can be proud of right now. It's deteriorating. And I think that what we need to do is we need to re-examine that and figure how scary it is, what kind of future we face if these forces of darkness are allowed to prevail. So, you know, in a way, it's something that we need to really think long and hard and make and decide whether or not we're going to choose to stay in the sideline or do something so that we can the course of history. There have been many brave people in the last few decades, both here and in the Philippines. Here in the United States, we've had people like Martin Luther King step up at a critical time. At that time in the 60s, there was a civil rights movement, and people were opposed to the war, but these were two different movements. There came a point, actually, in the mid-60s, when the two movements merged. And Martin Luther King himself was saying that it was necessary to oppose the war. That the same government that was depriving African Americans of their civil liberties were the ones pushing war. And it was necessary, if we were for civil liberties and equality, then we need to be opposed to the war. And I think the same is true today. Those cherished values that we aspire cannot be identified with war, with killing fellow human beings. Because this war is actually not a war to advance the interests of humanity. It's a war that actually is to advance, it's a war to try and save the capitalist system, you know, from the crisis that it's facing. And it's not in anyone else's interest but those. For example, big oil is really the ones to benefit from any war. Big oil and construction. Why do they want to pulverize countries? Well, because one, they want to monopolize control of the oil. Iraq is really being the second, world's second largest oil producer. The real interest is not to save the Iraqi people from Saddam Hussein. The real interest is securing the second largest source of oil. And who else would profit from pulverizing Iraq but the construction firms with whom the Bushes are connected? So, you know, there's a lot of self-interest involved. And that's why in many peace rallies, people have been dramatically been stating, no blood for oil. You know, we will not fight this war only on account of advancing oil. We're not going to put the young men and women in harm's way just so big oil will profit. And so now the system in the Philippines is connected to this situation. And you know, Arroyo's cheerleading for Bush is no accident. You see, there is a large, a people's movement in the Philippines that wants fundamental change in the Philippines. It's been there trying to fulfill the unfinished, unrealized aspirations of the people for more than a century. It was interrupted because the United States took over the Philippines. Now, the United States wants to return to the Philippines and convert the Philippines into a military base. Not only because it's afraid the Filipino people will take destiny in its own hands, but because in the Philippines you find the world's largest reservoir of natural gas. That's the connection between the people. And so the peace movement really wants to jumpstart the process. How? One of the things, the biggest obstacle is the manner by which the government has been behaving. How can you conceivably push peace process forward if you throw out, without any explanation, all the agreements that have been carefully crafted? How can you, in good faith, proceed with the peace process if you start demonizing the peace negotiators themselves? You can't. I mean, it's almost tantamount to saying we're not interested in peace. In fact, that's what the government of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo has been doing. Has been using Bush's war on terror to say, okay, these revolutionaries who have grievances are terrorists. So that means that we don't negotiate with them if they're terrorists. But this is a movement that also has the support of millions of people. So what are they saying? Do they want blood to flow? I mean, that's basically, without them saying it, that's what it means. And so, in the midst of all this, the many leaders have been coming out to demand that both parties go back to the table and push the peace process forward. Again, it means upholding the 10 major agreements, especially the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law. If the government is not afraid, because it's serious about its commitment to human rights, then it should go forward and implement it. But it seems like it's not. And it knows that even disinterested parties like Amnesty International point the finger at them as far as gruesome human rights violations go. So I think those of us who are for peace, who are for social justice, need to support this campaign, which is, I think, growing by the day in the Philippines. Now, the campaign is being launched by the Pilgrims for Peace. So far, those that have signed on are not only the leaders of the people's movement like Bayan, KMU, KMP, Gabriela, Alakbayan, Pamalakaya, and all the other people's organizations, but prominent politicians that start with the Vice President himself. Now, the Vice President, Teofisco Dingona, has been a very principled nationalist. He was one of the 12 magnificent 12 senators that voted for the abrogation of the military bases agreement back in 1991. He was, as senator, he was also opposed to the visiting forces agreement. And now, because of the signing of the mutual logistics support agreement, is now again in the forefront of opposing this. seems like that the direction that it's all taking us is, it is making it all, it is making it legally possible for the United States to bring its troops in and out of the Philippines and intervene in every which way you can. And it's not to go after Abu Sayyaf, it's really to go after the rebels, whether it's the Moro Islamic Liberation Front or the New People's Army. And in a way, no different from the manner by which the United States came into the Philippines to snatch independence from the Filipino people at the turn of the 20th century. So, I think this is a mouthful. I think it's also a very overwhelming task. But I think I'm confident that this peace campaign will take off. I think also that because we see how the Arroyo and Bush are pushing the war on terror, that we also see how we can help the cause of peace here in our own neighborhood. And with that, I would like us to help a campaign amongst the American people to demonstrate that we are opposed to the war, this impending war on Iraq. Well, Bush keeps on claiming that that he has the mandate of the American people. Not true. And the way we can manifest this is to show them with the millions of votes cast that we stand against the war. So, just two things. Support the appeal to delist CSON and the NPA from the European Union's list of terrorists, so we can. And then two, vote no war.
I think we better just Carl and
Hi, Dorothy. Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, Carl Kramer, San Francisco Living Wage Coalition and Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism.
I'm Doug, Freedom Road Socialist Organization.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, just for the benefit of Mario. My name is Mario.
Hi.
Oh, Marco.
Doug?
Bruce. Carl.
Roy.
Jane.
Larry, with the refusal resist.
So, I don't know, something here. But were there any particular concerns folks had?
Well, like one of the questions that I've been having in my brain is just how to make the movement in the Philippines more relevant to the larger anti-war movement, because everything seems to be Iraq now, and nobody's addressing the Philippines whatsoever. I mean, it's not even on the radar screen. So, I mean, I'm very interested in watching strategy to get that on the map with the larger anti-war movement.
Yeah. Actually, it will, at least with the two largest anti-war coalitions I know, Not in Our Name and as well as Answer, of which I'm a member of the steering committee, there is a conscious recognition that the Bush war on terror really is an endless war against everybody. It's really very tough, to be able to say to everyone that is drawn into the anti-war movement, look, here's the long list of concerns. Clearly, I think there needs to be a lot of concretization. clearly, I think it's a challenge for Filipinos themselves to articulate what exactly is happening in the Philippines as far as direct armed intervention goes. In that way, because the U.S. war on terror, I should qualify it as the U.S. imperialist war on terror. It's not the American people's war. It affects countries and nations and struggles in different ways. Certainly, the manner by which the American intervention affects the Filipino people is different from how American support to Israel is affecting the Palestinian people, or in how the U.S. is about to invade Iraq. But there is something overarchingly coherent about the way U.S. imperialism behaves. I think it's better that the American people grasp what this beast is, U.S. imperialism or U.S. monopoly capitalism. It is not something operating in the interest of the American people. In fact, the many popular slogans capture the essence. No blood for oil is a good attempt at capturing the essence of what's at stake. But of course, we need to delve deeper. For example, in the Philippines, it is the second front of the U.S. war on terror. And it has to be said, like it's said of the Colombian people's struggle, it is directed at the people's national liberation movements. That's the reason why the United States is moving in a big way. Of course, we need to keep a close tab in it. And those of us who do understand it, are challenged, I think. But I think just like the peace movement really has to take off, we need to also painstakingly explain exactly what's at stake. Some people probably haven't even heard about the Philippines, and so we need to do some basic education. But that's what that's stake.
Also, but at the same time, there's a need to intensify the struggle against the attempt to, push the American people to go to war. Because it's not only the war, actually, it's our civil liberties now that's under attack. The technology they are going to implement is really very intrusive. Even your pattern of using your credit card will be monitored. No, this is foolishness already. At the same time, this is really, it's really, that Big Brother picture, in the book by Orwell of 1984, with big screen watching everybody. That's what we have now. And we have to put a stop to that. Because that nullifies our civil rights, our political rights.
Yeah, the language is very interesting. I kind of puzzle over this way that war against terrorism is used. Terrorism is not an ideology; it's a tactic, right? But it's now been elevated to an ideology. It was that before there was communism and then anti-communism. And anti-communism was an ideology that unified all the fascists. You got all the Nazis and the racists together under this umbrella of anti-communism. After the dissolution of the socialist bloc, it's like the imperialists have been looking for something to unite an ideology around. So now
A scapegoat?
You have what?
A scapegoat?
No, more than a scapegoat. In order to fashion a an
Enemy.
ideology of the, you know, the, sort of the terrorism is now the enemy ideology. Terrorism is people that hate us, you know, being those in the United States. They hate us. Well, why do they hate us? Because we have freedom. Okay, so what is the anti-terrorism ideology? Well, anti-terrorism ideology is you terrorize the populations of Iraq, Philippines, Colombia, and you remove civil liberties and civil rights in the United States. You have a secret list of people that you're going to put in detention camps. You have surveillance of all aspects of people's lives. So this is anti-terrorism. You know, it's the new fascist ideology. And
Yeah.
Or double think, as Orwell said.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
the,
what's
The
very
Ministry of
interesting,
Peace.
actually, if we look at exactly, I mean, at face value, if we agree on a definition of terrorism, then, and if we agree that there are different types of terrorists, there could be individual terrorists, and there could also be state
State terrorism.
organized terrorism. And I think that in terms of magnitude and scale, state terrorism must be the greater evil, because it is capable of inflicting terror on millions. And I think if you look at again at face value, who has the weapons of mass destruction? I think hands down, this government possesses an incredible reservoir of being able to inflict evil on the rest of humanity. I don't care what kind of weapon of mass destruction, whether it's nuclear, chemical, biological.
Everything.
The United States government possesses quantities and qualities beyond anyone's imaginable reach. I mean, we talk, and this is how hypocritical the powers that be are. They talk about weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. They point the finger on Iraq, that they have bled for the last 12 years. And yet, when it comes to the Israel flaunting that it has nuclear weapons, which probably it has been able to come out with by stealing them from here, they're quiet. They're quiet. And how does that figure that Iraq is the greater enemy? You know, and in terms of weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, just specifically nuclear weapons, the United States has something in the range of 15,000. The Russia and China are in the hundreds, and in Great Britain. You know, how, in the scheme of things, does that compare? I mean, anyone who has any sense of mathematics can see who's going to be terrorizing whom. And I think it's safe to say the United States government, U.S. imperialism, is the one terrorizing the people of the world. So, anyway, I wanted to make a pitch that, you know, more and more we need to intensify, I think, the opposition to the war in Iraq. Whether it breaks out before, during, or after, we need to make it known. We need to amplify the resistance that's already been built up. You know, the coming together of 100,000 people here in San Francisco is incredible. But I think the stakes have gone up, and we need to be able to mobilize even more. So I think those of us who have been working close in hand with NION and really need to reach out to sectors that have not reached out to, churches and neighborhoods, and all that. And I think one good tool that we can use is to be able to sign people on who are normally passive, and who, you really have to kind of pry their opinion about the war on this. But it's also a good educational. You see, not everyone would be willing enough to go to the streets. But as we know from all the mobilizations, all the incredible mobilizations that have been going on, both pushed by Answer and I and many other peace groups, that in the heart of apolitical America, there's a lot of resistance. I think the economic crisis is going to get worse because the burden that was normally being shifted to the third world is being shifted more and more to the U.S. working class. And it's feeling it as never before. And I think that the reason why there's all these draconian measures and stripping away our civil liberties is to preempt basically the rise of resistance among Americans who can put two and two together. So I think the challenge here is for us to assert our rights, to defend them, and also to take back, basically, and defeat the impulse toward greater war. So I'd like everyone basically to sign on before we're done, to the Vote No War. I think it's an excellent tool for us. What will happen is, on the weekend of Martin Luther King's birthday, we will have simultaneous demonstrations as we have in San Francisco and in Washington, D.C. on that Saturday, I think January 18th. So I hope that all of us can multiply the numbers that have been brought out into the street. And I think after that, there will be a grassroots peace congress, where millions of signatures will be basically put together. Because we need to put it out there that besides those of us who have been brave enough, who have been staunch enough to go out to the streets, there's millions more behind us.
The so-called silent majority.
The so-called silent majority. And I think the potential is there. I was watching old documentary of Vietnam just this weekend. And what struck me was that then there were many sectors that were not opposed to the war. There were even unions that were supporting the war. But I think now, what you find is you have local labor unions coming out. You have labor councils coming out. And the war, the full-scale invasion hasn't even started. So I think it's a good thing. We need to maximize it. We need to be able to show that objectively, all of us are affected, and we need to move in opposition to, the Bush administration.
I just want to say on this, sorry, I came in Bridgeport, I'm going to have to do it. But anyway, I think that, that one point about, obviously there's some other people here that may be, better than those times, but, it was a lot more dissension amongst, people, in the beginnings of the Vietnam War era. People who were here and who were there, I can definitely testify to that. You went to a demonstration, like 10 people there or something. The very beginnings, it was like, you have a situation where the country is a lot more divided in a good sense, I think, right now. They're clearly, these, as you're saying, these draconian methods that they're putting in this thing, they just passed it today, the new Office of Homeland Security, this new information, this division of the Poindexter, Nixon's aide, what's it called, the Total Intelligence Awareness Agency. That's not that's a real name, Total Awareness Intelligence Agency, which is going to funnel all this stuff that you were talking about, all this information from your credit to what books you read in the library, your doctor's records, your dental record, all that stuff is gonna go into one agency.
See, pattern whether you're a terrorist.
Right, you know, and whatever, you know, whatever they want to serve you. But I mean, I think it's important to understand that this is because they're the ones that are worried. People that run the system, right? They're the ones that are worried. They do not have a divided. They have a divided country. You know, here you have they don't have jobs for people. You've got like, you know, people shooting each other in the streets. You've got the police running wild. This is, you know, and you know, you've got La La Land on TV. You know, this is they do not have things wrapped up in this country. Of course, that's why they're focusing on their security devices and they're, you know, trying to, you know, make it seem like they're all powerful. It's because they're not all powerful, and it's even true around the world. This is to me, this, you know, this is a gigantic gambit that they're on. They have set out for themselves that, you know, endless war. You know, that's what they set on their table. Yeah, we know about U.S. I mean, people just don't know U.S. imperialism. But this is a new stage with the beginning. Not new stage. I mean, you know, a development in terms of like what they're intending to do is to just go around the world and you know and make war on people. You know, and Iraq is one prong. You know, the Philippines, on the other hand, in these places, what do they have to deal with? They have the struggles of the masses of people.
Maybe Iran,
you know, Iran maybe. Colombia, Peru, but you know, like the Philippines, one of the reasons I came here is to support the struggle of the Philippines and other things. But you know, I mean, it's important to see you've got a serious mass struggle going on in the Philippines, and what are they doing there? They're putting, I'm sure you guys have already talked about it here, you know, the troops and you know, more troops and more money and all this kind of thing. But I mean, I think it's really important at this time for people to recognize the serious potential for there to be a mass movement to develop in this country. You know. There are big signs of it, you know, not only the numbers, but the character of the demonstrations around the country, the different places we had demonstrations, both not in our name, and, you know, and the answer, you know, there's really serious potential for things to really break out in this country, and we should look to that. I mean, one other thing to mention, and that is that we also need to step forward and defend those people that are under attack, who are receiving the brunt of the attack in this system. And right now, this is our. We have to look at the Muslim and Arab and South Asian community who have been, you know, facing the worst kinds of attacks. You know, you've got like, even the FBI of all people. I was listening to KPV on the way over here. Even the FBI is now admitting, you know, that the attacks on Arab and Muslims was up like, you know, 5 times or something like that, as if we didn't know. But they even have to admit it. But we need to actually stand up and step forward and defend the people that are under attack. I mean, there's a blue triangle network that's been formed around the country, which is from different places, you know, including people here, Fremont and what have you, to defend, working with Refuse and Resist, to defend people under attack. And we need to actually, you know, I don't know if you've seen those blue triangles we pass around, but we need to actually, you know, I work with Refuse and Resist around this issue of immigrants. When you talk to people about it, when you actually get in, people do not know that people are being, you know, incarcerated without lawyers and without talking to their families. Did you hear this thing? I just heard this again on the radio, and I'll stop here. There was like 2 guys, 2 Arabs, you know, who they were Iraqi, they were from Iraq. They were thrown in, they've been in jail for 4 years. You know why they're in jail? They finally got them out. That's what she said, 4 years. They were in jail because they were from Kabul, and there was some connection that was made. But it wasn't even Kabul, Afghanistan. They thought they were from Afghanistan. There was some language problem. In fact, they were from a town in Iraq called Kabul. You know, they got it, and the charges were, they were not. How could they be held for so long? Because they're held incommunicado. This is from the 1996. You know, they're using no effect. You know, there were other things that came around during that time that where people didn't have rights, where habeas corpus was not allowed. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to stand up against.
Hi everybody, my name is Tawny Nye, and I came here just to remind people and let people know who haven't heard about it yet, some of the anti-racist, anti-war initiatives that Answer's undertaken. And, you know, some members of the association are involved with the Answer Coalition and are aware of these, but I just wanted to let you know that there's resources available and what's going on. On January 18th, the day that commemorates the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we're organizing national demonstrations against war and racism here at home. You know, recalling that when Dr. King was assassinated, he was organizing a poor people's movement, a march on Washington. He had come out against the Vietnam War, and he was saying these resources should be used here at home. And he was playing critical roles in labor struggles, and he was really, bringing diverse currents of the movements for progress together. So we want to honor Dr. King that weekend by continuing to organize to make his dream a reality. And so the demonstrations are in Washington, D.C., and there'll be joint demonstrations in San Francisco. Of course, if people can go to Washington, D.C., go. The October 26th demonstrations were historic, but we anticipate these to be quite significant. It's an important opportunity to take a stand against racism, and expose, this war is such a sham. It's so entirely racist to demonize an entire people, in the case of the war drive on Iraq, it's the Arab people, but we've seen in the so-called war on terrorism that all people of color and all oppressed communities are bearing the brunt of it. And of course, right now, the drive is for invasion of Iraq, but we know that there's thousands of military personnel in the Philippines, that there's military advisors there, and the focal point can shift at any time, and we need to be prepared for that, whether it's North Korea or Colombia or Philippines. And that's what Answer's all about. Also, on following day on Sunday, Answer will be convening the grassroots People's Peace Congress to say Congress does not speak for us. We're against the war. So that's going to be really exciting and historic. And, as we're doing our work, all of us, we want to let people know you should go, but if you can't, there will be a demonstration here. And a pillar of that work is the Vote No War campaign. It's the people's referendum against the war, and people have voted over 400,000 so far. After the January 18th demonstrations, that it will be in the millions. Activists are collecting votes in this petition against the war to say, this is the real people's voice, and there's a strong movement that's against the war. And it's been so exciting on the campuses to be doing this work because students are really wanting to take some action and just want to know what to do. When I was younger, I used to say I grew up all during a period of reaction here in the U.S. And now I'm realizing, there are students out there, like in high school, and they don't remember anything even about the Gulf War. And so we are out there on the campuses organizing, going to teach-ins. It's very exciting, and I encourage students to get involved in that work. And I just wanted to let people know that there's a teach-in to help build for these demonstrations in San Francisco, and for all of us to educate ourselves and share our experience of fighting against the attack on the people here at home and abroad. And it's Saturday, December 14th at Horace Mann Middle School. And that's just at 23rd and Valencia Street in the Mission. It's right by 24th Street BART. And there's a number of speakers from the national, leaders of the Answer Coalition. And just if people don't know, if you're not familiar with Answer at all, it was formed in the aftermath of September 11th, actually, that same month in September, to oppose war and racism, and keep that struggle against U.S. war and intervention alive, and had historic demonstrations at September 9th, 2001. Then in April 20th, 2002, the historic demonstration for Palestine against the occupation, which was the largest demonstration for Palestine in the U.S. and history here in the U.S. And then, of course, October 26th. But the movement is wide and broad, and we want everybody to be doing all that they can within the organization or neighborhood to expand that and be a part of that on January 18th and 19th. So I have some flyers I'll pass around. Maybe I'll leave some extras here if you'd like to take some and give it to your neighbors, because that's the work everybody's doing. You know, I mean, take your petition to the corner store. We're getting hundreds of them mailed back every day. Take it everywhere you go. You know, if you're interested, you can contact Answer. The information's on the flyer. And, you know, once again, this is to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and that movement. So we want to reach out and have as many communities involved in this as possible, as you know, many different faith communities as possible. Also, it's going to be a very special event.
Also, just in case this war breaks out before then, we'd like everyone to know that the plan is to meet at 5th and at Powell and Market at 5 p.m. on the day of the invasion. And I think that, you know, it's very important that we have that word out, because, you know, we want to be able to immediately react if a full-scale invasion breaks out. So, and if it were to occur on Saturday, on the early hours or, you know, night time, then it would be the following day that protests will be taking place.
You said at 5 p.m.?
Yeah. The day of. So I also encourage folks to sign on to the appeal. And basically, what's been going on in the Philippines is that the Mutual Logistics Support Agreement has been signed by minor officials, Philippine military and the U.S. military. Almost like a slap in the face. It's met some very strong criticism from the Vice President on down, including the Senate President and Senators. And really, the whole intent of this is to be able to make it possible for the United States to go in and out of the Philippines at will. It's really and it's really directed at the people's movement. So, and if one were to consider that there's a systematic and a consistent demonization of the people's leaders, and a consistent effort to torpedo the peace process in the Philippines, that what is clear is there needs to be some support for a peace movement in the Philippines, urging not only to delist the leaders of the people's movement from, you know, a terrorist list, but also to urge the government and the National Democratic Front to return to the negotiating table, because what's at stake now is the achievements of the peace process are in danger of completely being thrown out the window. It took something like 10 years of negotiation to come out with 10 major agreements between the National Democratic Front and the Manila government. And now, because of the direct U.S. armed intervention and because of Macapagal Arroyo's all-out war policy, it seems like peace negotiations are no longer possible. So in response to this, the people's organizations have unfolded a Pilgrims for Peace campaign. And so I urge everyone to please sign on to this, because right now, the people's movement needs every bit of support.
Yeah, well, you know, yung mga bago na natin.
Hi. Can
Oh,
introduce
Francis.
yourself?
reporter from Belize on America. Just covering what's going on right now.
Just ask a question, I don't know if this is Bob, I want to ask about Professor Sisson, what's the state of, is it any different from the last month or so?
Just to give some background information. In July, there was an international solidarity mission that was organized by people's organizations with the people's organizations in the Philippines, basically to look into the extent of U.S. armed intervention in the Philippines. In the middle of that, and there were some American activists who were part of it. In the middle of that, a GI shoots a Mora civilian. And the incident, the whole incident was took place as the International Solidarity Mission was going through Mindanao. Well, it was a very good way of welcoming Colin Powell who was coming through, because he wanted to push the mutual logistics support agreement. Well, he wasn't able to, and he was chased all over town by protesters. So when he came back to Washington, D.C., he wrote a little memo. And the memo was something like, okay, I think the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army are foreign terrorist organizations. And because they are such, we need to take measures to freeze their assets, as if they had any in this country. But I think that it was sort of like a signal to crack down on any progressive group that was doing solidarity work with the Philippine movement and the Philippine struggle, including U.S. citizens. Shortly after that, Arroyo started declaring the CPP-NP as terrorist organization. And then it had an impact on the peace negotiations. Jose Maria Sison, Professor Sison, is the chief political consultant to the National Democratic Front's negotiating panel. Now, in large part, the 10 years' work behind the peace process, he made a tremendous contribution to. I think if it weren't for him and some senior leaders, this peace process would not have forged 10 major agreements. Well, this pressure from the U.S. convinced the right-wing anti-immigrant Dutch government that it's quite okay to crack down on these so-called terrorists. So they basically, Sison is a political refugee in the Netherlands and was basically deprived of all welfare payments, housing, and what have you. In other words, this refugee who under Dutch law cannot find employment or is not allowed to work is now being thrown out of the street. And I think it was a way of trying to pressure the negotiators into caving in. But more than that, I think it was really an attack on the anti-imperialist movement overall. Because Sison himself is not only involved in the negotiations with the Philippine government, he's also involved in international anti-imperialist organizations like the International League of People's Struggle and other endeavors. So I think that right now he's being supported by many progressive groups and parties, and there's an international campaign well underway to basically expose the attempts of the Bush and Arroyo governments to torpedo the peace process. I think it's important to put it in context that they're not just particularly demonizing him, they're really out to destroy the peace process.
I may add that actually the scheme is to demonize Season and then maybe arrest him, extradite him to the United States, so maybe imprison him in Guantanamo, and he will be declared as an enemy combatant and therefore not allowed to have lawyers and all the guarantees of civil liberties. This is the whole scheme. They have done it to Noriega. I mean, to him also. So that's the danger there that they'll do that.
I might add that it's important for progressives, especially anti-imperialists, to be clear that the Bush team is putting on the list of foreign terrorist organizations. Majority of those in this list are not terrorists. They're really national liberation movements from Palestine, from Colombia, from the Middle East, from the Philippines. And it's important to note that, if there were any so-called terrorist groups, it's those terrorist groups that the CIA had a hand in creating. Just like Bin Laden and Abu Sayyaf. I mean, these are CIA creations. And it cannot be emphasized enough.
And may I add also, adding insult to injury, Every time I watch Tagalog news at home, on Channel 26, okay, they talk about these terrorists, the demonized CPP, NPA, MILF, which the Arroyo government is saying, by the dictate of the U.S., of course, the #1 terrorist of the world. After they talk about it in the news, they will later on, they talk about the what's going on in the Philippines locally, like the crime has risen, prostitution of women, not only women, but even children, at age 8 above, and the rise of the Filipinos in the Philippines, the rise of what do you call this one? Suicide rate, because they cannot take anymore the poverty and the life there in the Philippines really hard. Especially for the Filipinos who do not have relatives abroad who can send them money. I want to take advantage of this while ABS-CBN is here because, I send money home every month, So it's really sad for our people in the Philippines who cannot really have a hard time, cannot survive the hardship in the Philippines. So it's funny because they talk about this terrorism and then they put in the news, the Filipino lives in the Philippines that they cannot, it's sad.
I wanted to say something about what had just been signed, the Mutual Logistics Support Agreement. Now, it's this term, mutual logistics support, is really has to be explained. 12 years ago, it was very clear that the people's movement was made a difference in having the bases removed. It was this massive pressure that convinced the senators to vote down the military base, a renewal of the military bases agreement with the United States. But ever since that happened, the United States has not stopped trying to get back into the Philippines. They've come up with all sorts of schemes. Well, they succeeded in getting the visiting forces agreement through because it wasn't going to allow a base, and they can just come in and out. But they could not stay for a very long time. Well, okay. The Mutual Logistics Support Agreement, though, if you really think about it, it really means having bases in the Philippines. Because what would support troops if it's not logistics support? And wouldn't that mean they'd have to be stationed? But there's a catch which makes it even worse than having bases. These mutual logistics and support are going to be paid for by Filipinos. And this is how cynical these U.S. imperialists are. They want to be able to fry us in our own oil. And for what end? For Filipinos to kill fellow Filipinos? Especially those who are trying to put an end to foreign domination, to landlessness, and to corrupt government in the Philippines. That's why it's so, it angers nationalists to no end that this is happening. And the reason why Arroyo is allowing this is not, is because she's counting on U.S. support to stay beyond to 2004 and beyond. And in the meantime, the people will have to endure even more suffering and humiliation with a more intensive U.S. domination.
Well, I think that the opportunity for reaching out and building support for the struggle in the Philippines is going to intensify a lot over the next few months. You know, we all read in the papers last week that the federal government is not extending the unemployment entitlements that were won, you know, through heroic struggle in the 30s here, and that each month after that, which I'm not sure who knows what month, it's like January, but no, each week another 100,000 people will be pushed off of unemployment. And there's no sign of economic recovery here in the U.S. or other parts of the world. And so more and more, I think people would begin to understand that the war on terrorism is a structural adjustment program here at home for the people in the U.S. And maybe more people will get an inkling of understanding, you know, what the poor of the Philippines have been suffering through and how heroic really just surviving day to day and their struggle has been. And in other countries, you know, struggling to resist U.S. domination economically, culturally. So I think we really have a lot of work to do. You know, it's a lot of trouble and suffering, of course, but always an opportunity to reach out and build some opposition, you know, for a better future.
Yeah, it's kind of like to hear.
You know, the problem of feudal backwardness, and also basically saying no to IMF, World Bank, World Trade Organization impositions, and as well as political and military impositions by the United States over the Philippines. And I think that's a tall order, but I think the people's organizations that have now waged at least two people power exercises are confident that we can continue to gather force and be able to overturn this inequity at some point in the future. And of course, because of a growing people's movement, then we find that the local ruling classes and also the U.S. imperialists are increasingly resorting to repressive solutions. And this direct U.S. armed intervention is an admission on their part that they have to use force because the people are waking up. And I think those of us here who are already part of the peace and justice and anti-war movement, we need to redouble our efforts and basically also strengthen the solidarity amongst us. I think I'm confident that down the road, our millions will prevail. There are all the positive signs.
Actually, the struggle in the Philippines needs all the international support it can get. And of course, the victory of the Filipino people's struggle was also the victory of the international forces for liberation. I mean, it's a mutual relationship.
I think that stopping the war, just like in Vietnam, the defeat of U.S. imperialism in Vietnam was really a victory for the American people. They won out, basically. It was the product of the civil rights struggle and the anti-war movement. And that U.S. imperialism was defeated. It's a testament to the strength of the forces of social justice. Please.
We stay 40 days in April under the curfew. Nobody can move from his home. And during these 2 years, we are under occupation. So nobody can move from city to another city. There is a siege around the cities, villages, camps, everywhere. So our headquarters in Nablus City as example, but we can't reach Nablus, so we start our work from a new office in Ramallah to help our workers, because during the Intifada, more than 65% from the Palestinian workers fired from their workplaces, living under the poverty line. Being 2 million people, Palestinian people, living under the poverty line. They don't have any income. And we don't have law for welfare or social security. So our federation, Palestine General Federation of Trade Union, start emergency program to help our workers. We give $150 for each unemployment workers. This is emergency gift to buy food, milk for their families, for their kids. And also we give free health insurance for unemployment workers, for the worker and his family. Also, we give a package of food for the workers. Before we came here, we gave 200,000 workers a package of food and 225,000 workers $150 each to buy some important things to live. And till this moment, during these 2 years, nobody can move from his home. We are suffering to reach here because we can't cross the checkpoints. There is a bulldozers, huge tanks, soldiers in the checkpoints. They don't let anybody to cross the checkpoint. They shoot against everything moving. So we go through rough roads, through the mountains, carrying our heavy bag to reach the other checkpoints and so on to reach the border. And after that, staying on the border 3 days to cross to reach Amman airport, and from Amman airport to here, to United States. So this is the economic situation. Many factories, hundreds of factories closed because they can't bring the material from outside the city. And also they can't send the material outside the city. We have, as example, a very big factory in Ramallah, sweet factory, 350 workers working in this factory, but very old and famous factory. And before the Intifada, they sent their material to Israel itself and to also to Arab countries, Gulf area. But now they can't send this material to Jerusalem or Nablus city or Gaza. So they closed this factory. And the other 100 of workshops and factory closed. So the workers lose their jobs. So 65% are living under the poverty line. And so the Palestinians, they don't have choice. They must continue their intifada, their struggle against the last military occupation in the world in Palestine. So we think that we will win, but we want to shorten this period to reach our dreams, to reach our right to establish our independent Palestinian democratic state in the border 1967 war, and Jerusalem is the capital without the settlement. They don't have the right to build settlement in our land. We are living 1,000 years in this land, and the Jewish from all over the world coming, and they stolen this land and build settlement on our land. So we must continue our struggle to build our independent state, and we feel that we are strong. So we don't have huge tanks, we don't have F-16 and helicopter Apache and etc. Very big army. We don't have. We have people. They have a power, rights to continue their struggle, determination to continue our struggle. We will never raise our hand and our white flag to sign to what they want, but we will continue our struggle to have our independence. We need peace more than others, and we need peace for the others, for the Israeli people. We want to live together in peace for all the Palestinian, the Israeli, all the people in the Middle East, but also we need our freedom, we need justice, we need your help to stop the war all over the world. This is our message to you, and we feel that we are members from this very big family, workers' movement family all over the world. So we feel that we are strong, and we hope that we are working together against war everywhere and support peace, freedom, justice, human rights, and workers' rights. Thank you very much.
Our delegation here to give a message from the children, the women, the workers,
behalf of the Filipino workers association, we wanted to extend some invitations to you. We ourselves are have been involved in international solidarity work for the last 18 years. The May First movement in the Philippines has been building international solidarity against imperialist globalization, and we feel that our struggle, being part of the one family of working men and women throughout the world, needs to be joined, and we need to be in constant dialogue to share how we fight for the betterment of all working people. Please accept these invitations, and hopefully we'll be in touch and find ways that we can come and visit us in the Philippines. I'm sure that we would be, our sisters and brothers in the Philippines will be more than happy to help ensure that we can join us there.
We too. Thank you.
They will be speaking tomorrow night at SEIU Local 250 in Oakland, and you're welcome to come. We also will have a video and make a longer presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.